There have been countless sci-fi horrors created over the years, and most of them appear to be evil on the surface, and they are. But for a select few, once you take a moment to think about why they're terrorizing people in any given story, you find their moral designation to be a little more complex. Such is the case with The Thing, a creature that has stood the test of time and solidified its place amongst the pantheon of sci-fi and horror greats. But is The Thing evil? Or perhaps more importantly, are we even able to claim that it's evil? Well, that's what we're here to find out. Hello everyone, and welcome to the 255th episode of Analyzing Evil, featuring The Thing. This episode has been a long time coming, and I'm happy that the patrons and members went ahead and suggested John Carpenter's 1982 film for one of their picks. But The Thing has made an appearance in more stories than just that film. In fact, the source material for the film, John W. Campbell Jr.'s Who Goes There, was first adapted into a screenplay by Charles Lederer, Howard Hawks, and Ben Hecht that would then be brought to life on the silver screen by Christian Nyby under the title The Thing from Another World. A classic in its own right that even made an appearance in John Carpenter's Halloween. Outside of these films though, there have been a number of other pieces of media that have been inspired by either the films themselves or Campbell's novella, including a 1972 film titled Horror Express featuring Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing that's essentially The Thing from Another World on a train, a 2011 prequel to John Carpenter's film, several comic books, short stories, and novels, a video game, and even various episodes of TV shows like The X-Files and Doctor Who that feature Thing-inspired creatures. All of these stories and iterations tackle this story and its characters in different ways, and most of them bring something new and interesting to the table. But in this video, we're going to focus on some of the more popular pieces, those being the original novella, The Thing from Another World, John Carpenter's The Thing, and the short story The Things by Peter Watts, which is an unofficial literary version of John Carpenter's story that's told from The Thing's point of view. But before we get started, let's take a rest for a moment with our sponsor for this video, Manta Sleep. You've all heard it 1,000 times by now. If you're not getting good sleep, then you aren't in good health both physically and mentally, and it's hard to get the rest your body needs if you're constantly disrupted by unwanted light or noise invading your sleeping area. But you'll never have to worry about that again once you pick up a few life-changing products from Manta. Manta offers 8 different styles of sleep masks that gives all types of sleepers the eye protection needed to make your dreaming hours as peaceful as possible. And all of Manta's masks feature unparalleled adjustability, a premium feel, and pro-nap movement that can soothe your eyes as they protect them if you choose their steam or cool masks, or even your ears with the sound mask and its built-in Bluetooth headphones, which is the one I have right here that I can't sleep without now that I've experienced the better quality of sleep my Manta mask has allowed me to have. But recently I've been using a couple new products Manta launched that have made my resting hours even better, their white noise machine and earplugs. The white noise machine is compact and features tactile movement that allows you to adjust between 15 different sounds even while in the dark, and their earplugs are the most comfortable and soundproof I've ever experienced, blocking out all those little sounds that keep you awake, but ensuring that you can hear your alarm just fine when it's time to get up. And if you need some extra help blocking out unwanted sounds, either of these choices are more than capable of handling the job. Manta's selection and quality are hard to beat, and though the holidays have just passed, I encourage you to browse their website and pick through all the different features of the mask they offer to find the one that best suits your needs, or the needs of someone dear to you that could use a little more rest as well, as no matter what time of year or what your sleeping schedule is, I guarantee a mask from Manta Sleep will only make you or someone close to you feel infinitely better while you're sleeping and awake. So if you're like me and the slightest sound and tiniest pinprick of light disturbs your slumber, head over to mantasleep.com and use the code VIOLET checkout to get 10% off your order and enhance your sleeping experience today. Thank you Manta Sleep for sponsoring this video. Now without further ado, let's begin. I'm sure most of you are more familiar with John Carpenter's version of this story than any other, and in that film, it's definitely left up to interpretation as to whether or not the Thing is truly evil, which we'll be exploring in just a moment. However, in Campbell's Who Goes There, the villainy of this creature is all but confirmed by its actions and the discussion its victims engage in regarding its origins and methods. Set in Antarctica, much like John Carpenter's film, the story beats are much the same, save for the fact that many of the men at the base as well as the base itself survive at the end. And rather than attempting to build a ship to escape, the Thing builds an anti-gravity backpack that it was going to use to jump from place to place. But the biggest difference here is that the Thing itself takes on a much different appearance. Here the Thing is described as a blue humanoid alien with 3 mad, hate-filled eyes blazed up with a living fire, bright as fresh-built blood, from a face ringed with a writhing, loathsome nest of worms, blue, mobile worms, that crawled where hair should grow, giving us a glimpse of either this creature's true form or the form of a creature it had imitated prior to crashing on Earth, something we never get to see in the 1982 film. Describing its face as holding a hateful and rage-filled expression also gives us something that the 1982 film doesn't. The implication that the thing is malicious, and we're given more information later on in the story to support this idea. Alright then, Blair. What can you say about it? What was it? Gary turned to the little biologist. I wonder if we ever saw its natural form. Blair looked at the covered mass. It may have been imitating the beings that built that ship, but I don't think it was. I think that was its true form. Those of us who were up near the bend saw the thing in action. The thing on the table is the result. When it got loose, apparently, it started looking around. Antarctica still frozen as it was ages ago when the creature first saw it, and froze. From my observations while it was thawing out, and the bits of tissue I cut and hardened then, I think it was native to a hotter planet than Earth. It couldn't, in its natural form, stand the temperature. There is no life form on Earth that can live in Antarctica during the winter, but the best compromise is the dog. It found the dogs, and somehow got near enough to Charnock to get him. The others smelled it, heard it, I don't know. Anyway, they went wild and broke chains and attacked it before it was finished. The thing we found was part Charnock, queerly only half dead, part Charnock half digested by the jelly-like protoplasm of that creature, and part the remains of the thing we originally found, sort of melted down to the basic protoplasm. When the dogs attacked it, it turned into the best fighting thing it could think of, some otherworld beast apparently. Turned, snapped Gary. How? Every living thing is made up of jelly, protoplasm, and minute, submicroscopic things called nuclei, which control the bulk, the protoplasm. The thing was just a modification of that same worldwide plan of nature. Cells made up of protoplasm, controlled by infinitely tinier nuclei. You physicists might compare it, an individual cell of any living thing, with an atom. The bulk of the atom, the space-filling part, is made up of the electron orbits, but the character of the thing is determined by the atomic nucleus. This isn't wildly beyond what we already know. It's just a modification we haven't seen before. It's as natural, as logical, as any other manifestation of life. It obeys exactly the same laws. The cells are made of protoplasm, their character determined by the nucleus. Only in this creature, the cell nuclei can control those cells at will. It digested Charnock, and as it digested, studied every cell of his tissue, and shaped its own cells to imitate them exactly. Parts of it, parts that had time to finish changing, are dog cells, but they don't have dog cell nuclei. Blair lifted a fraction of the tarpaulin. A torn dog's leg with stiff gray fur protruded. That, for instance, isn't dog at all. It's imitation. Some parts I'm uncertain about. The nucleus was hiding itself, covering up with dog cell imitation nucleus. In time, not even a microscope would have shown the difference. Suppose, asked Norris bitterly, it had had lots of time. Then it would have been a dog. The other dogs would have accepted it. We would have accepted it. I don't think anything would have distinguished it. Not microscope, nor X-ray, nor any other means. This is a member of a supremely intelligent race, a race that has learned the deepest secrets of biology and turned them to its use. What was it planning to do? Blair grinned unpleasantly. Take over the world, I imagine. Take over the world? Just it? All by itself? Connick gasped. Set itself up as a lone dictator? No, it would become the population of the world. Populate the world. Does it reproduce asexually? Blair shook his head and gulped. It doesn't have to. It weighed 85 pounds. Charnock weighed about 90. It would have become Charnock and had 85 pounds left to become, Jack for instance, or Chinook. It can imitate anything. That is, become anything. If it had reached the Antarctic Sea, it would have become a seal, maybe 2 seals. They might have attacked a killer whale and become either killers or a herd of seals. Or maybe it would have caught an albatross or a skua gull and flown to South America. Norris cursed softly. And every time it digested something and imitated it, it would have had its original bulk left to start again. Blair finished. Nothing would kill it. It has no natural enemies because it becomes whatever it wants to. If a killer whale attacked it, it would become a killer whale. If it was an albatross and an eagle attacked it, it would become an eagle. Lord, it might become a female eagle, go back, build a nest, and lay eggs. Now obviously Blair's assertion that it would take over the world is just speculation, but given that the thing appears hostile, is intelligent and capable of complex thought considering it attempts to build an anti-gravity device to escape at the end of this version of the story, and never once makes an attempt to communicate with anyone, and immediately chooses violence after being released from its icy prison, I'd say that's not far off from the truth. Furthermore, later on in the story, we're given the following statement from Dr. Copper. The thing is selfish. You didn't think it looked as though it were possessed of a store of the higher justices, did you? Dr. Copper pointed out. Every part of it is all of it. Every part of it is all for itself, I imagine. If Conant were changed, to save his skin, he'd have to… But Conant's feelings aren't changed. They're imitated perfectly. Or they're his own. Naturally, the imitation, imitating perfectly Conant's feelings, would do exactly what Conant would do. It's interesting to see this stated here, as frequent viewers of this channel will know that I've often made the claim that being selfish isn't evil, but evil is always selfish. And by all accounts, the thing in the original version of this story is indeed a selfish creature who cares not for anything or anyone but its own survival and imminent lordship over the earth. That being said, that's still just speculation, and we never learn whether or not this being truly did endeavor to conquer the earth, or if it was simply an alien creature lashing out at what it perceived to be threats to its safety in a hostile and foreign environment. What further adds credence to the latter assertion is the fact that this creature is stated multiple times in this narrative to be imitating those that it possesses, not actually possessing them. For if it were truly taking over the minds and bodies of the men it targeted, it may have been able to read into their thoughts and learn that they weren't threats to it, which could have changed its actions here, however unlikely that is. So because we don't actually know whether or not it was truly malicious in this story, it's hard to claim that it's evil. However, the physical evidence we're provided as far as its demeanor and actions go suggests that it definitely could have been as the characters in this story claim. And personally, I like to think that this thing was actually evil. But I wouldn't fault you for concluding that it isn't evil, or its motives too vague to make an accurate judgment. The thing from another world, on the other hand, I think it's safe to say that this creature is more animal, or rather plant, than anything else, and isn't evil at all. Once again, the story beats in this version are pretty similar to the source material, despite the setting being changed from Antarctica to Alaska, and then the North Pole. However, this thing isn't a worm-faced blue alien that seems hell-bent on destruction and domination, but rather a hulking, seemingly unintelligent plant-based creature that feeds on blood to survive. This thing never tries to build its own escape method, but it did arrive on this planet in a flying saucer, so it's more than possible that it's capable of intelligent thought, forming complex plans, and crafting advanced machinery. But it's also possible that it hijacked this craft, or that it's some horrid result of plant-based experimentation by whatever species created it. Due to the fact that it needs to feed on blood to survive, and isn't attempting to kill people for some unknown reason, I personally think this version of the character is more trying to preserve its own life in this new environment it's found itself in, and is thus more animalian in nature than anything else, as I stated earlier, which makes it about as evil as a Venus flytrap, feeding on flies. Regardless of what's true here, it's pretty cool to see the Marshal of Dodge City as a hulking monstrosity, so if you haven't seen this version yet, I'd recommend watching it whenever you get a chance. Now on to nearly everyone's favorite version of this story, John Carpenter's The Thing. Now, despite not appearing as a blue three-eyed alien with rage and hatred plastered across its alien face, this version of the Thing is just as scary, if not more so than the original version of the monster, with the imitations it creates here being grotesque abominations that make one's stomach turn as much as it terrifies you. As far as evil goes though, this thing is the most ambiguous of them all. We never get to see its true form, nor do we ever hear it speak or communicate in any way. And aside from the fact that it came here in a spaceship and attempts to create another one over the course of the story, everything about this thing is rooted in mystery, leaving a lot of questions unanswered. Unlike the thing found in Campbell's story, however, there is something that can potentially clue us into what this thing's motivations are in this version. Like the Campbell version, this thing doesn't feed on its hosts. It imitates them in order to outmaneuver them and hide amongst them. So we can't claim that what it's doing is for the sake of sustaining itself like we could with the thing from another world iteration. However, in Who Goes There, the characters postulate that the thing created its anti-gravity device in order to hop from one continent to another, and that supports their theory that it was trying to travel across the planet in order to assimilate all creatures on Earth and conquer the planet. The thing here, on the other hand, attempts to craft a ship, and that opens up the possibility that it wasn't going to travel to other parts of the Earth to assimilate everything on the planet with it, but rather that it was attempting to return home. Now, the thing from the novella could have been trying to use its anti-gravity device to travel to a place that had more materials it could use to craft a ship to return home as well. But the fact that it shows clear displays of malice in this version allows us to conclude that it may be operating with ill intent, whereas the Carpenter version of the character is terrifyingly brutal, but never displays any indication that it's doing what it's doing with some nefarious goal in mind. So with that in mind, it's entirely possible that John Carpenter's thing wasn't evil, but there's also the possibility that it was. And given the information we have about this creature in this version of the story, as a standalone piece, the thing's moral designation is nearly impossible to discern, as the lack of any motive outside of its construction of a spacecraft leaves us little to go off of here. However, the Thing's short story by Peter Watts opens up an entirely new possibility, that being that the Thing isn't evil, nor an animal, nor even a stranded being attempting to return home, but a being that believes itself benevolent that's only trying to do what it thinks is right. As I mentioned in the intro, this story is essentially the same as John Carpenter's film, but it's told from the Thing's point of view. From its internal dialogue, we learn that the Thing is actually a long-lost piece of a hive mind who once moved from world to world, communing with other worlds in order to improve them for the betterment of itself and the cosmos. Importantly, it outlines how other planets and their organisms are essentially defined as worlds, not as individuals, with all of the planets that it came across over the course of its long existence being hive minds like itself, with the creatures of Earth being the first it's ever come across that aren't a part of a greater whole, and the individuality, finality of our existence, and the inability to shapeshift and improve themselves biologically like everything else in the universe apparently horrifies the Thing. When I mentioned it communed with other hive minds, what that means is that it would work with other willing hive minds to improve both their biomasses through cooperative assimilation, which is exactly what it's attempting to do here. And the hostility of the Earthlings and their rejection of its desire to help them improve for the betterment of the cosmos confuses, saddens, and enrages the Thing. For as I mentioned earlier, it sees itself as benevolent, and Earthlings, all Earthlings, as inferior cancerous beings who don't know what's good for them, anomalies that, as it states at the end of the story, it will change regardless, forcing salvation into them if it has to. It's really a fascinating story, one that I wanted to read some excerpts from for you, but I don't want to spoil any of it, so if you'd like to read it, you can find a link to it in the description. That aside though, what this retelling of Carpenter's film gives us is something interesting, the ability to claim that the Thing, as far as it is concerned, is not evil at all. It's simply a creature caught in a horrifying environment doing what it's always done, and it's only trying to help the poor sorry creatures of this planet become something more. Despite that, we are more than capable of claiming such a being as evil, as it would for all intents and purposes destroy us in order to make us into what it believes to be better creatures. And I, for one, have no problem claiming a creature that would attempt to take away everything and everyone I love for the sake of betterment, evil. But what do you think? Have I been accurate with my assessments of each version of this character that I've discussed here? With such an ambiguous entity like the Thing, I'd love to know your thoughts down below, as we can all benefit from hearing different perspectives, especially with a character like this. So please, leave a comment down below with your thoughts on any or all versions of this iconic monstrosity. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Analyzing Evil, and I hope you've enjoyed. Make sure to leave a suggestion for a villain you'd like to see featured down below, and be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. A big thank you to my existing subscribers, my patrons, my members, anyone who's decided to honor me with a super thank, and especially our Dark Lord channel members, Elijah Kai and Effigy. And a most vile thank you to those whose names you're seeing on screen now. Join the channel's Discord server and subreddit to interact with myself and the community, and follow me on the social media platforms listed below to keep up with the channel. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll be seeing you soon.